It's over. The dealbreaker that kept John Harbaugh from coaching the Cleveland Browns. For years, the idea of John Harbaugh coaching the Cleveland Browns has hovered like a fascinating what if over the NFL landscape. In a league obsessed with alternate realities, what if a draft pick had gone differently? What if a coach had chosen another team? This scenario stands out as one of the most intriguing. John Harbaugh, one of the most respected head coaches of his generation, leading a franchise long defined by instability, heartbreak, and unrealized potential. It sounds like the perfect redemption story. But it never happened. Now, with more details emerging from league insiders and those close to the situation, a clearer picture has formed. There was real interest. There were real conversations. And yet, there was also one decisive issue, one unmistakable deal-breaker, that ensured Harbaugh would never take the Browns' job. This is the story of why it was truly over before it ever began. John Harbaugh, a coach built on stability. To understand why the Browns' pursuit failed, you first have to understand who John Harbaugh is as a coach. Since taking over as head coach of the Baltimore Ravens in 2008, Harbaugh has been the definition of consistency in a league that devours coaches whole. He has led Baltimore to multiple playoff appearances, sustained winning seasons, and a Super Bowl championship. More importantly, he has built a culture rooted in accountability, preparation, and trust between coaching staff and front office. Harbaugh is not a control freak in the traditional sense, but he is deeply principled. He believes in alignment, ownership, general manager, and head coach moving in the same direction. When that alignment is missing, he sees chaos. And in Harbaugh's mind, chaos is the fastest way to fail in the NFL. That philosophy would prove critical when Cleveland came calling. The Browns' long-standing search for a savior. Few franchises in professional sports carry the emotional weight of the Cleveland Browns. Once a proud organization with a rich football legacy, the modern era has been defined by mismanagement, constant rebuilding, and a revolving door of head coaches. From 1999 onward, the Browns cycled through coaches at an alarming rate. Each new hire arrived with promises of a fresh start, only to be swallowed by internal dysfunction. For years, Cleveland chased young offensive minds, defensive specialists, disciplinarians, and innovators. None of it stuck. By the time Harbaugh's name was even whispered in Browns circles, the franchise was desperate for legitimacy. They didn't just want a coach, they wanted credibility. They wanted someone who could command respect from players, executives, and fans alike. John Harbaugh fit that description perfectly. Mutual interest, at least on the surface. Contrary to popular belief, this was not a one-sided fantasy cooked up by fans and media. According to multiple league insiders, there was genuine curiosity from Cleveland's side about whether Harbaugh might be open to the idea, particularly during moments when his future in Baltimore was being publicly questioned. Ownership explored the possibility quietly. They understood Harbaugh would never be swayed by money alone. This would require structural promises, long-term security, and a clear football vision. From Harbaugh's perspective, listening didn't mean committing. Like any seasoned professional, he was willing to hear what another organization had to say. But listening is not the same as believing. And belief is where things fell apart. The deal-breaker: power, control, and football authority. At the heart of the failed pursuit was one fundamental issue: football control. John Harbaugh has spent most of his career in an environment where the head coach's voice carries significant weight. In Baltimore, major decisions, from roster construction to assistant coaching hires, are collaborative. Harbaugh doesn't operate in isolation, but he also isn't undermined. Cleveland could not offer that same structure. The Browns' organizational model placed too much influence in too many hands. Ownership involvement, front office politics, and shifting power dynamics created an environment Harbaugh viewed as unstable. He was unwilling to step into a situation where his authority could be questioned, overridden, or diluted. For Harbaugh, this wasn't about ego. It was about effectiveness. He believed, correctly, that without clear decision-making authority, even the best coach in the world would struggle. And Cleveland, despite its promises, could not convincingly demonstrate that it was ready to fully empower him. That was the deal-breaker. Trust issues rooted in history. Harbaugh's concerns were not hypothetical. The Browns' recent history offered plenty of cautionary tales. Previous coaches had spoken privately about mixed messages from ownership. Some were hired to rebuild, only to be fired before their vision could take root. Others were promised patience but judged harshly by short-term results. Front office restructures often happened midstream, leaving coaches stranded without allies. To Harbaugh, this pattern suggested systemic dysfunction rather than isolated mistakes. He reportedly asked direct questions. Who makes final roster decisions? What happens if the general manager and head coach disagree? How insulated is the coaching staff from ownership pressure? The answers, while polished, were not convincing enough. Loyalty to Baltimore played a role, but wasn't everything. It would be inaccurate to suggest Harbaugh was eager to leave Baltimore. His loyalty to the Ravens is real and deeply rooted. The organization gave him his first head coaching opportunity and stood by him through highs and lows. However, loyalty alone would not have prevented a move if the right opportunity presented itself. What truly mattered was fit. Baltimore provided professional respect, operational clarity, and long-term trust. Cleveland, despite its ambition, could not yet offer the same assurances. In Harbaugh's mind, leaving a stable situation for an uncertain one would have been irresponsible, to himself, his staff, and his players. The Browns' perspective, a missed opportunity. From Cleveland's point of view, the failure to land Harbaugh was a painful reminder of how reputation matters in the NFL. Even with resources, a loyal fanbase, and a growing talent pool, the Browns were still fighting perceptions shaped by decades of missteps. Elite coaches don't just evaluate rosters, they evaluate organizations. Harbaugh's refusal wasn't a personal rejection, it was an institutional one. And that reality stung. What this says about the modern NFL. This episode highlights a broader truth about today's NFL: coaches with leverage demand structure, not chaos. The days when a franchise could lure a top-tier coach with money alone are over. The most respected names want partnership, clarity, and stability. They want to know that when things go wrong, as they inevitably do, they won't be scapegoated. John Harbaugh's decision reinforces that lesson. Could this ever change? Is the door permanently closed? In practical terms, yes. Harbaugh is deeply entrenched in Baltimore, and the Browns have since moved in different directions. Even if Cleveland were to restructure its leadership model, the timing would likely never align again. More importantly, the trust gap remains. Trust, once lost, or never established, is incredibly difficult to rebuild. Final thoughts. Why it was truly over. The story of John Harbaugh and the Cleveland Browns is not about arrogance or missed phone calls. It is about philosophy. Harbaugh believed that winning in the NFL requires unity at the top. Cleveland could not convincingly demonstrate that unity. And so, before contracts were drafted or press conferences planned, the answer was already clear. It was over, not because Harbaugh didn't believe in the Browns' fans, not because he feared the challenge, but because the structure, the very foundation of success, wasn't there. Until that changes, Cleveland's search for a transformational leader will remain unfinished.